Axel von Fersen was a Swedish count and a prominent figure in the European high society. He was well educated and multilingual. He fought in the American Revolution and was one of the Swedish king's closest confidants. Fersen had a close relationship with the French royal family, particularly with the Queen Marie Antoinette. Fersen played a key role in the royal family's escape from Paris during the French Revolution. Despite his efforts, the escape was unsuccessful. Count Fersen now had to maximize the effort to save the royal family. Several days had passed since the royal family returned to the confines of Paris. After their failed escape, they will be under constant surveillance. The correspondence between Marie Antoinette and Fersen was re-established after 2 months. Fersen had to use all sorts of means to send her letters, sometimes hidden in the lining of a piece of clothing, other times in a box of biscuits. Fersen was the only link between royals and the leaders of Europe. New plans of saving the French royal family started to be drawn. Fersen, with the support of the Swedish and Russian troops landing in northern France, were to execute a lightning strike against Paris and secure the royal family. This wasn't just a fantasy, it was a meticulously crafted plan. 2 Swedish officers were dispatched to map the entire route between the landing site and Paris, and surprisingly, those very maps still exist today. Determined to see Marie Antoinette once more, Fersen made a bold decision. In December 1792, he set out towards Paris. It was dangerous. Not only was he a wanted man for his involvement in the failed royal escape, but also a deserter, having abandoned his regiment. Capture meant certain imprisonment, or worse, as Fersen was wanted by the revolution. Miraculously, Fersen navigated through every guard post and passed through the watchful eyes of the Revolutionary National Guard. Arriving in Paris on the 13th of February 1792, he established contact with the Queen. Alone, again together, reunited after 8 long months, we can only imagine the emotions that coursed through their hearts and the whispered words that passed between them. Fersen's diary entry merely states, "She lives nicely, stayed there." The last 2 words were his way of conveying that he spent the night with a woman. The following day, Fersen also had an audience with the king, who stubbornly rejected any notion of escape, unless Allied armies reached Paris. Despite Fersen's earnest attempts, the king remained resolute. The king explained to Fersen what he thought about it, and he said, "I know that I am taxed with weakness and irresolution, but no one was ever in my position. I know that I missed the right moment. It was the 14th of July. I ought to have gone then, and I wished it. I lost the moment, and since I have never found it, I have been abandoned by the world." Fersen knew he couldn't stay any longer, and he left Paris the same day. Fersen left for Brussels. When he arrived, he was met with the news that Gustav III had been shot at the Royal Opera in Stockholm. And a few days after that, the Swedish king had succumbed to his wounds. At the same time, Austria and Prussia declared war on France to restore the monarchy. The war that ensued proved disastrous for the French, and the revolutionaries grew increasingly desperate. As a result, the French people accused the king of working with the enemy. In an effort to ensure the safety of the royal family, the Austrians and the Prussians published a manifesto outlining their intentions and consequences for any French population who acted against them. However, this declaration had an unintended effect. A mob of 20,000 French citizens descended upon the Tuileries, where only 900 Swiss guards stood in defense. For 3 harrowing hours, a ferocious battle raged. Amidst the chaos, the royal family managed to escape and sought refuge in the National Assembly. Eventually, they were relocated to Le Temple, a small castle, while France and Paris grew increasingly radical with each passing day. Fersen, upon learning of the mob that stormed the Tuileries, intensified his planning for a new escape. Letter exchanges between Fersen and Marie Antoinette multiplied, bearing witness to their unwavering resolve. A few months passed, Fersen spending time in Brussels and then in Düsseldorf, and from there he received distressing news. On the 21st of January 1793, Louis XVI had been executed after being found guilty of multiple charges. Louis Capet had stood before the guillotine and uttered his famous last words, "I die innocent, forgiving those who are responsible for my death." Marie Antoinette was separated from her son, and on the 2nd of August she was imprisoned in the Tower of the Temple. Fersen's desperations to save Marie Antoinette grew. On the 22nd of September, Fersen poured his heart out in his diary, writing, "If I lose her, I lose everything and will be alone in the world. Then I will have lost 3 royals who have been my benefactors and friends. The only thing that will be left is one woman whom I love, but we are not like-minded, and she belongs to another, making it impossible for her to join me. I still have Taube, my best friend, and Sophie, my sister, and they are the only ones who can comfort me. But I can't decide to leave everything behind and live in Sweden." When Fersen heard that Marie Antoinette would be brought before the revolutionary tribunal, he was absolutely crushed by the news. Fersen was just praying that one day he could see her again. Fresh attempts to save her proved futile, and on the 16th of October 1793, she was found guilty and sentenced to death. Her last word is an apology to the executioner, whom by accident she stepped on his foot. She was 37 years old when she was executed. Fersen received one last hastily written note from Marie Antoinette, which said, "My heart belongs to you." 4 days later, Fersen got word of Marie Antoinette's execution. In a letter to his sister, Fersen wrote, "The state I am in, only you can conceive. I have lost everything in the world. She lives no longer. My cup is full to the brim. I do not know how I am to live and bear my sorrow. All is over for me." Now at 39 years old, Fersen was now the head of the von Fersen family, a general major in the Swedish army and ambassador. Yet, despite his newfound wealth and position, he cannot be with the woman he loved. Upon Fersen's return to Sweden, he was greeted with open arms by those who still hold him dear, including his mother, sister, and best friend. The outpouring of love after his 6-year absence overwhelms him, and tears of joy stream down everyone's faces. Fersen stayed in Sweden for 9 months, attending to his father's affairs and seeking new ministerial or ambassadorial roles. In Sweden, Fersen's reputation remains intact, and he finds solace in the familiarity of his homeland. However, the Sweden he loved was lost with Gustav III, replaced by Duke Karl's regent government. Fersen described this new court as lacking refinement, where everything feels cheap. He laments the decline in people's education, conversational skills, and the dreariness of the theatre and opera. Fersen now directs his focus towards a young king, Gustav IV, who holds him in high regard. Meanwhile in Europe, the war concludes. France emerges as the victor and calls for peace congress. Representing Sweden, Fersen attends the negotiations. It is during this time that he encounters Napoleon Bonaparte. The meeting between Fersen and Bonaparte is anything but cordial. In his journal, Fersen describes Napoleon as a small, slender man with dark hair, possibly afflicted with a chest ailment. Napoleon addresses Fersen as Monsieur, instead of using his rightful titles like ambassador or count. In a diplomatic attack, Napoleon claims that Fersen's presence is an insult to the French Republic. Fersen is deeply offended by these remarks, and a heated dispute ensues between the two. Despite attempts to defuse the situation, Fersen decides to leave, but Bonaparte follows him, prolonging the conflict. Fersen acknowledges the need for composure and refrains from responding sharply to Napoleon's provocations. Nonetheless, he takes note of the insults hurled at him, including being labeled as a French deserter, leader of an anti-revolutionary party, and even the Queen's lover. Fersen notes in his diary that Napoleon would not have a great life, and he would have a dark end. The situation ultimately forces King Gustav IV to bring Fersen home. Back in Sweden, Fersen enjoys an esteemed reputation. He is named one of Sweden's gentlemen, one of the highest honors, and a chancellor of the Uppsala University, but also King's advisor. At 44 years old, Fersen, wealthier than ever, finds out that most of his friends have vanished from his life. Because of this, he dedicates himself to his work, which is appreciated as Fersen is named Marshal of the Realm. During this period, Fersen experiences a change in tone in his diaries. He becomes more satisfied and adapts to his new life, finding comfort in the respect and admiration he receives from the Swedish people, including the king himself. He is now at the pinnacle of his career, and perhaps the most content he has been in a long time. He endeavors to modernize everything he is involved in, gradually adopting Swedish manners and even writing administrative documents in Swedish. On March 31st, 1808, Fersen writes his last diary entry after 30 years of documenting his life. Again, tensions rise in Europe, and in February 1809, Russia declares war on Sweden, followed by Denmark in March. A consequence of the war was that Gustav IV was forced to abdicate by a coup. During a coup against Gustav IV, Fersen remains with the royal family, but the extent of his involvement is unclear. It is unknown whether he supported the king or joined the coup against him. As the king is taken into custody and a new government is established, Fersen is appointed as a part of that government. This may indicate Fersen's perspective on the situation in Sweden and his involvement in the coup. Karl, the uncle of the king, becomes regent and later assumes the title of Karl XIII. Fersen continues in his role at the court as the Riksmarskalk, or Marshal of the Realm. Karl lacks an heir and therefore needs to adopt a future successor. In a surprising move, the Swedish nobility chooses a Danish prince named Christian August, which he changes to Karl August in an attempt to appeal to the Swedish people. Karl August quickly becomes a beloved figure among the people, endearing himself to the hearts of the nation. Sensing an opportunity to solidify his own claim to the throne, Karl August publicly announces his intention to adopt Gustav IV's son as his heir. A bold move and one that garners both support and opposition. On a trip to Stockholm, disaster strikes as Karl August loses control of his horse, leading to a fatal fall that injures his back. Despite the best efforts of the doctors present, Karl August succumbs to his injuries. The official verdict points to a stroke as the cause of death. The news of Karl August's demise shocks the inhabitants of Stockholm. The government, already scrambling to find a new heir, faces a growing storm of rumors. Whispers spread throughout the city, accusing Karl August of being poisoned. With each passing day, the rumors gain traction, and soon, the finger of blame points toward Fersen and his siblings. They are vilified as the criminals and responsible for the prince's alleged murder. Meanwhile, the coup makers who dethroned Gustav IV set in motion a new constitution. Unfortunately for Fersen, these reforms leave him increasingly isolated politically. In the eyes of the new government, he becomes a living symbol of the old nobility and monarchy, an embodiment of a bygone era. In his capacity as Marshal of the Realm, Fersen takes it upon himself to plan and execute Karl August's funeral. However, the new uncensored press seizes upon the opportunity to portray Fersen as the mastermind behind the alleged conspiracy. Fersen requests an audience with the king to discuss their plans. Shockingly, the king refuses, causing widespread surprise and insult. Fersen, undeterred, maintains his composure. That evening, the mayor of Stockholm expresses concern for Fersen's safety and advises him to abstain from participating in the funeral procession. The king, however, callously remarks that little dirt on Fersen's clothes would do him good, disregarding Fersen's long-standing loyalty. The officer in charge of the troops for the funeral, Silversparre, wanted every soldier to be armed with 10 shots and given the right to respond to violence with violence. However, the king refused this request. Silversparre believed that Fersen's safety would be compromised if his wishes were not granted, but the king dismissed it. Undeterred by the warnings, Fersen joins the funeral procession, riding in a carriage. The streets fill with people, and an unusual air of tension hangs in the atmosphere. The pubs open unusually early, and many indulged in excessive drinking. At 10 a.m., the entire procession gathered at Stockholm Castle, and Fersen appeared unperturbed. As the church bells rang, signaling the beginning, Fersen took his seat in the carriage, and the slow procession started. Yet, his calmness remained intact. As the procession makes its way through Stockholm, the atmosphere turns hostile. Soon, young boys run alongside Fersen's carriage, spitting on it. As the carriage moved closer to the central part of the city, the cries grew louder with each passing moment. "Murderer! Murderer!" However, Fersen was unafraid. No stranger to unruly mobs, remains resolute in the face of mounting hostility. Approaching the heart of the city, stones rain down upon Fersen's carriage. The first stone shatters a window, injuring one person inside. The situation deteriorates further. True chaos unfolds. Hundreds of people lie in wait, eagerly anticipating the sight of Fersen's white carriage. A whistle pierces the air, and a new onslaught of stones begins. Within seconds, every window on the carriage shatters. Amidst the chaos, a man manages to approach the carriage and strikes Fersen with a cane. Soldiers stationed at the royal castle hear the commotion and request permission to intervene, but their plea falls on deaf ears. Silversparre downplayed the severity, claiming he would handle the situation himself. Though battered and bloodied, Fersen's carriage manages to reach a street where the royal guard stands with 200 men, but they do nothing. The assault continues, and Fersen desperately tries to shield himself, but to no avail. Suddenly, a group of oddly dressed sailors rush forward, cutting the horses loose and leave the wagon stranded. A man in uniform sees this opportunity, opens the carriage door and drags Fersen out. He escorts Fersen to the nearest house, as the mob continues its relentless pursuit. Silversparre, finally arriving on the scene, assures Fersen of his safety within the house. Meanwhile, some individuals from the procession manage to retrieve the horses, with the rest of the procession continued forward. As the mob had not witnessed Fersen's escape, they follow. However, rumors quickly spread to where Fersen is hiding, and the mob demands his arrest. The mob breaks into the house and once again proceeds to attack Fersen, tearing at his clothes and assaulting him further. Silversparre manages to regain some control and promises to take Fersen to a police station. As they make their way through the mob, more people pull at Fersen's clothes, leaving him exposed and vulnerable. He is struck in the head. His earring is ripped out, causing blood to stream down his face. When they reach the street in their attempt to reach the police station, the mob intensifies their assault. He is attacked relentlessly, and the crowd grows increasingly violent. Eventually, Fersen falls to the ground, but the mob continues its onslaught. Silversparre drops Fersen to save his own life. Then Fersen manages to make it to the 200 royal guards and yells, "Boys, help me!" The soldiers sees one of the highest ranking men in the kingdom drag himself towards them, bloodied and helpless, attacked by a mob. The soldiers act according to their training and protects Fersen from the mob, but their commander yells an order to the soldiers to stand down. The soldiers sees Fersen getting dragged away by the mob. Fersen manages to get down in a nearby basement to get a few moments of breathing room. His face is swollen. He can hardly see. One of Fersen's servants managed to get to his master, but soon the mob finds Fersen again. They grab hold of Fersen's servant and ask Fersen who this man was. Fersen answers that he does not know him, and the mob lets the servant go, thus saving his life. The mob drags Fersen out of the basement. The mob goes berserk. He falls to the ground. They jump on his chest, stick objects in his eyes, and unleash their fury upon him, while accusing him of murdering the prince. A sailor in the crowd yells, "This you have earned, your prince murderer." Then a small boy jumps on Fersen's stomach, so blood streams out of the nose and mouth. The mob, still inflamed, moves on to burn houses and kill even more people. Only then do the soldiers intervene, dispersing the mob and restoring order, leaving behind Fersen's lifeless and violated body. Several hours later, Fersen's body is recovered. Fersen's body is taken to one of the family estates to prepare for the funeral. On December the 2nd, 1810, Axel von Fersen is buried according to his rank. No one is held accountable for his murder. The investigation fails to uncover the full extent of the conspiracy and the individuals involved. The king, protecting those worth protecting, ensures that no questions are asked about the soldiers' inaction or the mysterious sailors who vanish without a trace. Axel von Fersen finds his final resting place in the Church of Young. The male line of von Fersen dies out in 1839, followed by the female line in 1879. The legacy of Axel von Fersen, the nobleman who played a significant role in Swedish and European history, remains tarnished by the tragic events surrounding his untimely demise. Axel von Fersen's life is a story of loyalty, love, and duty. He did everything in his duty, what anyone can demand of a man.